The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty border checkpoint as Maria Rodriguez adjusted her worn leather holster. She had been a border patrol agent for only 8 months, but today felt different. The radio crackled with reports of unusual activity near the abandoned warehouse district, 3 miles from the main crossing. Her supervisor, Agent Thompson, had sent her to investigate what seemed like routine smuggling activity. Maria drove her patrol vehicle down the cracked asphalt road, watching the landscape change from populated areas to empty lots filled with rusted containers and forgotten buildings. The silence was unsettling. Usually this area buzzed with legitimate truck traffic during morning hours, but today she saw nothing except occasional tumbleweeds rolling across her path. She parked behind a concrete barrier about 200 yards from the largest warehouse. Through her binoculars, she spotted movement near the loading docks. Several figures moved between trucks, but something about their coordination suggested this was more than simple cargo theft. They moved with military precision, posting guards at strategic points around the perimeter. Maria reached for her radio to call for backup, but static filled the channel. She tried different frequencies, but the communication system seemed jammed. Her training kicked in as she realized this might be more serious than anyone had anticipated. The warehouse complex was supposed to be empty, abandoned for over 2 years after the previous owner went bankrupt. She decided to move closer on foot, leaving her vehicle hidden behind the concrete barrier. Her service weapon felt heavier than usual as she approached the fence line. The chain-link barrier had been cut in several places, with the openings disguised to look like normal wear and tear. Professional work. Through the fence she could see the operation more clearly. Men in dark clothing were unloading wooden crates from trucks with covered license plates. The crates were marked with symbols she didn't recognize, but their careful handling suggested valuable or dangerous contents. One man directed the others with hand signals, avoiding vocal commands that might carry across the open space. Maria counted at least 15 visible individuals, all appearing to be armed. This was definitely beyond her capability to handle alone, but with communications down, she faced a difficult choice. She could retreat and try to find a working phone, potentially losing track of the operation, or she could maintain surveillance and hope backup would arrive when she failed to check in. She chose to stay and observe, positioning herself behind an old shipping container that provided cover, while maintaining a clear view of the warehouse. The men continued their work with obvious urgency, frequently checking their watches and scanning the surrounding area. Their behavior suggested they expected to finish quickly and disappear before anyone could respond. As minutes passed, Maria began documenting everything she could see. License plate numbers, descriptions of individuals, details about the cargo. Her notes would be crucial if this escalated beyond her control. She used her personal phone to take photos, though the distance limited their quality. The operation's scale became more apparent as additional trucks arrived. What she had initially assumed was a small smuggling ring was clearly something much larger. The coordination, equipment, and manpower suggested an organized criminal operation with significant resources. The remote location and communication jamming indicated careful planning and inside knowledge of patrol schedules. Maria's radio suddenly crackled to life. A garbled transmission came through, but she couldn't make out the words clearly. She tried responding, but only static answered her attempts. The brief transmission suggested that someone was trying to reach her, possibly backup responding to her missed check-in calls. The men at the warehouse seemed to notice something had changed. Several stopped their work and began pointing toward the perimeter, though not in her direction. Their body language suggested heightened alertness, possibly responding to the same radio transmission she had heard. Within minutes, the organized activity became more frantic. The leader began issuing visible commands, and men started moving cargo more quickly. Some individuals took defensive positions around the warehouse perimeter, while others continued loading trucks. The change in their behavior confirmed Maria's growing suspicion that this was not a routine smuggling operation. She realized her position was becoming more dangerous as the criminals increased their security measures. Her training emphasized the importance of officer safety, but abandoning surveillance now might mean losing the only evidence of this operation's existence. The communication jamming suggested they had technical capabilities beyond typical criminal organizations. Maria made the difficult decision to maintain her position while trying to move closer to get better documentation. She began working her way along the fence line, using abandoned equipment and debris for cover. Each movement brought her closer to potential discovery, but also provided clearer views of the operation's scope. The number of armed individuals continued to grow as more vehicles arrived. What had started as a small group had expanded to over 20 people, all moving with purpose and discipline. Their equipment appeared professional grade, including communication devices that were obviously working, despite the jamming affecting her radio. As she reached a position about 100 yards from the nearest warehouse entrance, Maria could hear fragments of conversation. The language sounded foreign, though she couldn't identify it specifically. The tone suggested urgency and concern, possibly about timing or security. Her new position revealed additional details about the cargo. Some crates bore international shipping marks, while others appeared to be unmarked wooden boxes of varying sizes. The careful handling and armed security suggested contents more valuable or dangerous than typical smuggled goods. Maria checked her watch and realized she had been observing for over an hour. Her missed check-in would definitely trigger search protocols, meaning backup should be en route. However, with communications compromised, coordinating any response would be extremely difficult. The situation was escalating beyond anything her training had prepared her for, but retreat was no longer a simple option. The criminals had established a security perimeter that would make withdrawal difficult without detection. She was committed to maintaining surveillance until backup arrived. Regardless of the personal risk involved, the morning sun continued climbing, reducing shadows that provided concealment while increasing visibility for both her observation and potential discovery by the armed group controlling the warehouse complex. The sound of approaching helicopters broke the morning silence. Maria looked up to see two aircraft in the distance, but they weren't the familiar Border Patrol choppers she expected. These were black helicopters with no visible markings, flying in formation toward the warehouse complex. The armed men below immediately took notice, some pointing skyward while others ran for cover. Maria realized the situation was spiraling beyond local law enforcement. The unmarked helicopters suggested federal involvement, possibly DEA or FBI, operations that her department hadn't been informed about. This would explain the communication jamming and the sophisticated nature of the criminal operation she had stumbled upon. The helicopters circled the warehouse complex twice before landing in an open area about half a mile away. Maria could see armed figures emerging from the aircraft, but the distance made identification impossible. The criminals at the warehouse responded by accelerating their loading operations while establishing defensive positions. Through her binoculars, Maria watched the warehouse leader speaking rapidly into a handheld radio. Within minutes, additional vehicles began arriving at the complex. These weren't cargo trucks but appeared to be SUVs and pickup trucks carrying more armed personnel. The small smuggling operation she had discovered was revealing itself as something much more significant. The new arrivals took strategic positions around the warehouse perimeter, transforming the facility into what appeared to be a fortified compound. Maria counted over 30 armed individuals now visible, all moving with military-style coordination. Their equipment and tactics suggested training far beyond typical criminal organizations. She tried her radio again, hoping the federal presence might have cleared the communication jamming. Static still dominated the channels, but she caught fragments of transmissions that sounded like tactical communications. Multiple agencies were apparently coordinating a response to the situation she had discovered. The federal forces from the helicopters began advancing toward the warehouse complex, moving in formation across the open ground. Maria could see them through her binoculars, wearing tactical gear and carrying assault rifles. Their professional movement patterns confirmed these were highly trained law enforcement or military personnel. The criminals inside the warehouse complex responded by taking defensive positions behind vehicles and cargo containers. The loading operation ceased entirely as all personnel focused on the approaching threat. Maria found herself caught between two armed forces, with no clear path to safety. Her position behind the shipping container provided concealment from both groups, but she realized her situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. Crossfire from a potential shootout would make her current location extremely hazardous. She needed to find better cover or attempt to identify herself to the federal forces. The tension escalated as the federal team reached positions about 300 yards from the warehouse perimeter. Both sides appeared to be assessing the situation, possibly attempting negotiations through radio communications that Maria couldn't hear clearly. The standoff had developed quickly, but neither side seemed eager to initiate violence. Maria used this pause to examine her options. Her training emphasized the importance of identifying herself to other law enforcement officers, but the distance and potential for confusion made direct approach extremely risky. She decided to work her way toward the federal positions while maintaining cover. Moving carefully along the fence line, she tried to get closer to the federal forces without exposing herself to the criminals in the warehouse. The broken terrain provided some concealment, but every movement risked detection by either side. Her Border Patrol uniform should identify her as law enforcement, but in a tense situation, identification might not happen quickly enough. The federal forces had established a command post behind a small hill about 400 yards from the warehouse. Maria could see additional personnel arriving, including what appeared to be negotiators and technical specialists. The scale of the response confirmed that this operation involved more than simple smuggling. As she moved closer to the federal positions, Maria heard her name being called over a loudspeaker. Someone had identified her vehicle behind the concrete barrier and was attempting to establish contact. The announcement revealed her position to everyone in the area, including the criminals she had been observing. The criminals in the warehouse complex immediately began searching the perimeter more aggressively, apparently looking for the Border Patrol agent who had been mentioned. Maria realized her cover was blown, and that she needed to reach the federal forces quickly before the criminals located her position. She began moving more rapidly toward the federal command post, abandoning stealth for speed. The open ground, between her position and safety, stretched about 200 yards with minimal cover available. Behind her, she could hear shouts as the criminals continued searching for her location. The federal forces spotted her movement and began providing cover, with several agents advancing to meet her halfway. Their professional response suggested they had been aware of her presence and were prepared to extract her from the dangerous situation. Maria ran across the open ground, expecting gunfire from the warehouse at any moment. The criminals had apparently located her original position and were focusing their search in that direction, buying her precious time to reach safety. Her heart pounded as she covered the distance to the federal positions. She reached the federal command post without incident, immediately identifying herself to the agents who had provided cover during her withdrawal. They were FBI agents conducting a long-term investigation into an international arms trafficking operation that had been using the abandoned warehouse as a distribution point. The FBI team leader explained that Maria had unknowingly stumbled into a federal sting operation that had been months in development. Her presence had accelerated their timeline, forcing them to move before all surveillance assets were in position. The communication jamming had been part of their operation to prevent the criminals from coordinating with outside contacts. Maria provided her observations and documentation to the FBI team, including the photos and notes she had gathered during her surveillance. The information proved valuable for understanding the current situation and the number of armed individuals they were facing. The FBI commander outlined the tactical situation. The criminals were well-armed and positioned defensively within the warehouse complex. Initial attempts at radio contact had been unsuccessful, and the suspects appeared prepared for a prolonged standoff. The federal operation had been designed to catch them during a vulnerable moment, but Maria's discovery had changed the dynamics. Additional federal resources were en route, including specialized tactical teams and negotiation specialists. The FBI intended to contain the situation and negotiate a peaceful resolution if possible, but they were prepared for the likelihood that the criminals would resist arrest violently. The FBI negotiator's voice echoed across the open ground through a powerful speaker system. Agent Sarah Chen had been trying to establish communication with the warehouse occupants for over an hour, but her attempts were met with silence. The criminals had barricaded themselves inside the complex and showed no interest in dialogue. Maria watched from the federal command post as more tactical vehicles arrived. The FBI hostage rescue team deployed around the perimeter, establishing sniper positions and planning entry routes. The operation had grown from her simple patrol assignment into a major, federal law enforcement action involving dozens of agents and specialized equipment. The warehouse complex remained eerily quiet despite housing over 30 armed individuals. Occasional movement could be seen through windows and doorways, but the criminals maintained strict discipline in their defensive positions. Their silence suggested either professional training or desperation that made negotiation unlikely. Agent Chen turned to Maria with a concerned expression. The negotiator had dealt with similar situations before, but this group's complete lack of response was unusual. Most criminals in standoff situations at least attempted to negotiate for safe passage or improved conditions. The absolute silence suggested they were planning something more aggressive. Through high-powered surveillance equipment, the FBI team identified the warehouse leader as Viktor Kozlov, a former military officer from Eastern Europe with connections to several international criminal organizations. His presence elevated the threat level significantly, as intelligence files indicated extensive combat experience and a history of violent resistance to law enforcement. The tactical commander, Agent Rodriguez, briefed Maria on the weapons and equipment they had observed. The criminals possessed military-grade assault rifles, body armor, and what appeared to be explosive devices. The cache of weapons suggested they had been preparing for confrontation with law enforcement, possibly as part of their smuggling operation security. Maria provided additional details about the cargo she had observed being loaded. The wooden crates and careful handling suggested the criminals were moving something more valuable than typical smuggled goods. Agent Rodriguez suspected the shipment might include weapons, drugs, or other high-value contraband that would explain the heavy security and resistance to arrest. The FBI technical team established surveillance drones over the warehouse complex, providing real-time intelligence about criminal positions and movements. The aerial footage revealed that the criminals had created makeshift fortifications, using cargo containers and vehicles, transforming the warehouse into a defensive compound. As afternoon approached, the standoff showed no signs of resolution. The criminals had access to food and water within the warehouse, while their defensive positions made assault extremely dangerous for law enforcement. The FBI commander faced the difficult decision of whether to maintain the siege or attempt a tactical resolution. Agent Chen made another attempt at communication, this time addressing Viktor Kozlov by name and demonstrating federal knowledge of his identity and criminal history. The personal approach sometimes prompted responses when general appeals failed, but the warehouse remained silent. Maria noticed increased activity among the federal forces as additional specialized units arrived. The FBI had brought in chemical specialists, suggesting they suspected the cargo might include hazardous materials. The presence of bomb disposal experts indicated concerns about explosive devices within the warehouse. The tactical situation became more complex when civilian vehicles began arriving at roadblocks established around the perimeter. Local residents and media personnel were drawn by the visible law enforcement presence, creating additional security concerns for the federal commanders. Agent Rodriguez explained to Maria that prolonged standoffs often developed their own dangerous momentum. The longer the situation continued without resolution, the more likely it became that someone would make a decision leading to violence. Both sides were heavily armed and prepared for confrontation. The warehouse complex suddenly came alive with activity as the criminals began moving between buildings within the compound. Surveillance drones tracked their movements, revealing they were repositioning weapons and supplies in preparation for something. The organized nature of their movements suggested coordinated planning rather than panic. FBI intelligence analysts worked frantically to decode the criminal movements and predict their intentions. The repositioning could indicate preparation for assault, escape attempt, or destruction of evidence. Each possibility required different tactical responses from the federal forces. Maria watched as sniper teams adjusted their positions to maintain clear fields of fire on the warehouse complex. The professional efficiency of the federal response impressed her, but also highlighted how far beyond normal law enforcement the situation had escalated. Agent Chen received word that Viktor Kozlov's organization had been under federal investigation for over 2 years. The warehouse operation was part of a larger international network, smuggling weapons and military equipment to criminal organizations across multiple countries. The stakes were much higher than a simple border violation. The FBI commander made the decision to attempt a final negotiation before considering tactical options. Agent Chen's voice carried across the complex with an ultimatum: surrender within 1 hour or face assault by federal tactical teams. The message was broadcast in multiple languages to ensure understanding. For the first time since the standoff began, the warehouse responded. A voice called out from the main building, demanding safe passage to the Mexican border in exchange for surrendering the facility. The request was immediately rejected by federal negotiators, but it confirmed that the criminals were willing to communicate. The negotiation opened new possibilities, but also revealed the criminals' desperation. Their demand for safe passage suggested they understood the serious federal charges they faced and were unlikely to surrender without guarantees they couldn't receive. Maria realized she had become part of a situation much larger than her morning patrol assignment. The international implications and federal resources involved indicated this case would have consequences far beyond the local border area. As the deadline approached, tension increased among both law enforcement and criminal forces. The FBI tactical teams made final preparations for potential assault, while continuing to hope for peaceful resolution. The criminals in the warehouse maintained their defensive positions while apparently debating their response to the federal ultimatum. The hour deadline passed without response from the warehouse complex. Agent Chen tried one final appeal for surrender, emphasizing that tactical assault would be extremely dangerous for everyone involved. The silence that followed confirmed that the standoff was moving toward its most dangerous phase. Agent Rodriguez gave the order for tactical teams to move into final assault positions. The peaceful resolution everyone had hoped for was no longer possible, and the situation was about to escalate into direct confrontation between heavily armed forces in a complex urban environment. The first gunshot shattered the afternoon silence like thunder. Maria ducked instinctively as the sound echoed across the open ground between the federal positions and the warehouse complex. Agent Rodriguez immediately grabbed his radio, demanding a situation report from his tactical teams positioned around the perimeter. The shot had come from inside the warehouse, but no federal agents reported taking fire. Surveillance drones revealed movement within the complex as the criminals appeared to be taking more aggressive defensive positions. The FBI commander realized the situation was deteriorating rapidly beyond their control. Agent Chen abandoned her negotiation equipment and moved to the tactical command center. The time for peaceful resolution had passed, and the federal forces needed to prepare for active combat with heavily armed international criminals who had demonstrated their willingness to use violence. Maria found herself assigned to assist with communications coordination as the FBI tactical teams began their approach. Her knowledge of the warehouse layout from her earlier surveillance proved valuable for planning entry routes and identifying potential danger areas within the complex. The hostage rescue team moved in coordinated groups toward predetermined breach points around the warehouse perimeter. Their black tactical uniforms and specialized equipment made them nearly invisible as they advanced across the broken terrain surrounding the complex. Suddenly, automatic gunfire erupted from multiple positions within the warehouse complex. The criminals had apparently decided to fight rather than surrender, opening fire on the advancing federal agents. The sound of assault rifles filled the air as both sides engaged in intense combat. Agent Rodriguez coordinated the federal response from his command position, directing tactical teams to maintain cover while returning fire. The criminals had excellent defensive positions within the warehouse, making direct assault extremely dangerous for the federal forces. Maria watched in shock as the situation she had discovered during routine patrol transformed into a full-scale military-style battle. Bullets flew across the open ground as federal agents sought cover behind vehicles and concrete barriers while advancing toward the warehouse complex. The FBI sniper teams engaged targets within the warehouse, their precision rifles targeting criminal positions that threatened advancing tactical units. The coordinated response demonstrated the extensive training and preparation that federal forces brought to dangerous situations. Within the warehouse complex, the criminals fought with desperate intensity. Their return fire was accurate and sustained, suggesting significant combat experience among Viktor Kozlov's organization. The wooden crates and cargo containers provided excellent cover for defensive fighting. Agent Rodriguez received reports that several federal agents had been wounded by criminal gunfire, though none seriously. The body armor and tactical equipment had protected them from the worst effects of the enemy fire, but the intensity of resistance was greater than anticipated. The tactical situation became more complex when the criminals began using explosive devices. Several small explosions within the warehouse complex created smoke and confusion, while potentially destroying evidence of their smuggling operation. The FBI bomb disposal team prepared to enter once the area was secured. Maria coordinated radio communications between different federal units as the battle continued. Her experience with law enforcement communications proved valuable in managing the complex coordination required for the multi-unit tactical operation. The federal forces gradually gained ground around the warehouse perimeter, using superior numbers and equipment to overwhelm criminal defensive positions. However, the core warehouse buildings remained under criminal control, and Viktor Kozlov's organization continued fierce resistance. Agent Chen monitored police scanner frequencies to ensure local law enforcement stayed clear of the federal operation. The last thing they needed was local police accidentally entering the combat zone and creating additional complications for the tactical teams. The FBI technical specialists identified that the criminals were using military-grade communications equipment to coordinate their defense. This explained their organized resistance and suggested connections to professional military or intelligence sources that provided advanced equipment. As the afternoon progressed, the federal forces methodically cleared the outer areas of the warehouse complex. Each building required careful clearing operations to ensure no criminals remained hidden in positions that could threaten advancing agents. The main warehouse building remained the center of criminal resistance. Intelligence estimates suggested that Viktor Kozlov and approximately 15 heavily armed associates had barricaded themselves inside with the most valuable cargo and weapons. Agent Rodriguez made the tactical decision to surround the main warehouse completely before attempting entry. The criminals inside were trapped, but their desperation made them extremely dangerous. Any assault on the building would likely result in casualties on both sides. The FBI commander brought in additional resources, including armored vehicles and specialized breaching equipment. The final phase of the operation would require overwhelming force to minimize casualties among federal agents while ensuring the criminals could not escape. Maria observed the professional efficiency with which the federal forces operated despite the intense combat situation. Every movement was coordinated, every decision calculated to maximize success while minimizing risk to law enforcement personnel. The siege of the main warehouse building began as federal agents established firing positions covering all exits. The criminals inside responded with sporadic gunfire, but their ammunition supplies appeared to be running low after hours of intense combat. Viktor Kozlov's voice finally came over a captured radio frequency, demanding to speak with federal commanders. His English was heavily accented but clear as he attempted to negotiate conditions for surrender. The desperation in his voice suggested the criminals understood their hopeless situation. Agent Chen returned to her negotiation role, but from a much stronger position than earlier in the day. The criminals were now surrounded and running low on ammunition, while federal forces had unlimited resources and time to maintain the siege. The negotiations centered on the criminals' demand for medical treatment for wounded associates and guarantees of fair treatment under federal custody. Agent Chen could offer medical care but made no promises about legal proceedings for international arms trafficking charges. As evening approached, the intensity of combat decreased but the standoff continued. The federal forces maintained their siege positions while preparing for night operations if the criminals continued to resist surrender. Maria realized she had witnessed the transformation of her routine patrol assignment into a major international law enforcement operation. The professional response of federal agencies demonstrated the extensive resources available for combating organized crime. The warehouse complex showed extensive damage from the day's fighting, with bullet holes and explosive damage visible throughout the facility. The evidence of the gun battle would require extensive investigation and documentation once the area was secured. The final phase of the operation was approaching as federal commanders prepared for either negotiated surrender or tactical assault on the main warehouse building where Viktor Kozlov's organization made their last stand. The warehouse fell silent as darkness settled over the complex. Viktor Kozlov had stopped responding to negotiation attempts, and thermal imaging revealed minimal movement inside the main building. Agent Rodriguez suspected the criminals were either planning something desperate or simply waiting for an opportunity to escape under cover of darkness. Maria helped coordinate the placement of portable floodlights around the warehouse perimeter. The FBI intended to eliminate any advantage darkness might provide to the trapped criminals. The powerful lights would make any escape attempt visible to federal snipers positioned around the complex. Agent Chen received intelligence that Viktor Kozlov's organization had used tunnels in previous operations. The possibility of underground escape routes changed the tactical situation significantly, requiring ground-penetrating radar to scan beneath the warehouse complex for hidden passages. The FBI technical team deployed seismic sensors around the warehouse to detect any underground movement. If the criminals attempted to use tunnels, the sensitive equipment would provide early warning to federal forces positioned above ground. Inside the federal command post, Agent Rodriguez studied architectural plans of the warehouse complex obtained from city records. The building had been constructed over old storm drainage systems that might provide concealed routes to other parts of the industrial area. Maria noticed increased activity among the federal forces as additional specialized units arrived. The FBI had requested military assistance, and Army engineers were bringing tunnel detection equipment normally used in overseas operations. The scope of resources being deployed emphasized the importance of capturing Viktor Kozlov's organization. The thermal imaging suddenly detected rapid movement within the warehouse as the criminals appeared to be repositioning again. Agent Rodriguez ordered all tactical teams to heightened alertness as the suspects might be preparing for a breakout. Surveillance drones equipped with night vision cameras circled the warehouse complex, providing real-time intelligence about any external movement. The aerial surveillance had detected no escape attempts, but the possibility remained that the criminals might try to fight their way out. Agent Chen attempted contact with the warehouse again, emphasizing that federal forces had unlimited time and resources to maintain the siege. The psychological pressure of being completely surrounded often encouraged surrender when tactical pressure failed. The warehouse remained silent, but the thermal signatures suggested the criminals were still alive and active inside. Their lack of communication might indicate internal discussions about surrender versus attempting a desperate escape or final armed resistance. Maria coordinated with local emergency services to ensure medical teams were positioned nearby. The FBI expected casualties if the standoff escalated to final assault, and immediate medical attention could save lives on both sides of the conflict. The ground-penetrating radar revealed a complex network of old utility tunnels beneath the warehouse area. Some passages appeared to connect with the storm drainage system, providing potential escape routes that the federal forces needed to secure immediately. Agent Rodriguez dispatched tactical teams to investigate and secure the tunnel entrances within a 2-mile radius of the warehouse. The underground approach required specialized equipment and training, but the FBI was prepared for complex operations involving multiple levels of terrain. The tunnel security operation revealed that Viktor Kozlov's organization had been using underground routes for months. Evidence of recent activity was found in several passages, including supplies and communications equipment that suggested long-term planning for evading law enforcement. Inside the warehouse, thermal imaging detected what appeared to be preparation for movement toward the building's basement levels. The criminals might be attempting to access the tunnel system, requiring immediate federal response to prevent escape. Agent Rodriguez ordered the deployment of chemical agents into the tunnel system to force any criminals underground back to the surface. The non-lethal but effective chemicals would make the confined spaces uninhabitable while not causing permanent harm. The FBI tactical teams prepared for simultaneous assault on both the main warehouse and the tunnel system entrances. The coordinated operation would prevent the criminals from using underground routes while maintaining pressure on their primary defensive position. Maria observed the complexity of the federal response as multiple specialized units coordinated their actions. The operation demonstrated the extensive training and resources that law enforcement agencies brought to confronting organized international crime. The chemical deployment into the tunnel system immediately triggered activity within the warehouse basement. Thermal imaging showed rapid movement as the Criminals apparently encountered the effects of the chemical agents in their attempted escape route. Viktor Kozlov's voice suddenly returned to the captured radio frequency, coughing and demanding medical attention for chemical exposure. His surrender offer was conditional on federal guarantees for medical treatment and protection from other criminal organizations that might target him in custody. Agent Chen responded professionally to the surrender offer while making no commitments. Beyond standard medical care and legal protection under federal custody, the negotiation focused on immediate surrender procedures that would ensure safety for everyone involved. The criminals began appearing at warehouse windows, displaying white materials to signal their surrender. The federal tactical teams maintained their positions while preparing to process the surrender according to established protocols for high-risk arrests. Viktor Kozlov emerged from the main warehouse entrance with his hands raised, followed by 14 associates who appeared exhausted and defeated. The chemical effects and psychological pressure of the extended siege had finally overcome their resistance to capture. The FBI tactical teams moved in carefully to secure the surrendering criminals, maintaining weapons ready in case the surrender was a deception. Each individual was searched and restrained before being moved to secure transportation for processing. Agent Rodriguez coordinated the evidence preservation within the warehouse complex as federal investigators began documenting the extensive criminal operation. The cargo, weapons, and communications equipment would provide valuable intelligence about international arms trafficking networks. Maria assisted with the initial documentation of evidence as investigators cataloged the seized materials. The wooden crates contained military-grade weapons, ammunition, and communications equipment worth millions of dollars on the black market. The investigation revealed that Viktor Kozlov's organization had been operating from the warehouse for over 6 months, using it as a distribution center for weapons shipments to criminal organizations throughout North America. The scope of the operation was much larger than initial intelligence had suggested. Agent Chen interviewed the captured criminals to gather intelligence about other members of the organization who were not present during the standoff. The cooperative responses suggested that the chemical exposure and siege pressure had weakened their resistance to providing information. The FBI technical team discovered extensive documentation within the warehouse that detailed the international connections of Viktor Kozlov's arms trafficking network. The intelligence would support similar operations against criminal organizations in multiple countries. As dawn approached, the warehouse complex had been completely secured and the investigation was well underway. Maria's routine patrol assignment had led to the dismantling of a major international criminal operation and the capture of dangerous arms traffickers. The successful conclusion of the standoff demonstrated the effectiveness of federal law enforcement coordination and the importance of alert patrol officers who recognize suspicious activity. Maria's quick thinking and professional response had been crucial to the operation's success. The morning sun revealed the full extent of damage to the warehouse complex as federal investigators continued processing the crime scene. Bullet holes riddled the buildings, and debris from explosive devices scattered across the loading areas. Maria walked through the complex with Agent Rodriguez, documenting her original observations for the official investigation report. Viktor Kozlov sat in federal custody, providing detailed information about his criminal organization in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His cooperation revealed connections to arms trafficking networks spanning 3 continents, making the warehouse operation just one component of a massive international criminal enterprise. The weapons cache discovered in the warehouse exceeded FBI estimates by a significant margin. Military-grade assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and advanced communications equipment filled dozens of wooden crates. The street value approached $10 million, representing one of the largest arms seizures in regional history. Agent Chen interviewed Maria extensively about her initial observations and decision-making during the crisis. The Border Patrol agents' actions had been exemplary, demonstrating exactly the kind of alertness and professional response that law enforcement agencies hope to see from patrol officers. The investigation revealed that Viktor Kozlov's organization had been planning to distribute the weapons to criminal groups involved in drug trafficking along the border. The arms would have significantly increased violence in an already dangerous region, making their seizure crucial for public safety. Maria learned that her radio communications had been jammed by sophisticated equipment operated by the criminal organization. The jamming capability suggested connections to intelligence services or military organizations that provided advanced technology to criminal networks. The FBI technical analysis of the seized communications equipment revealed ongoing coordination with criminal organizations in Eastern Europe, Central America, and Asia. The warehouse operation was part of a global network that federal agencies had been investigating for over 3 years. Agent Rodriguez explained that Maria's discovery had accelerated federal plans to shut down the entire network. The FBI had been gathering intelligence for months, but her stumbling onto the operation forced them to act before all surveillance assets were properly positioned. The captured criminals provided information about other warehouse operations in different states, leading to coordinated raids by federal agencies across the country. Maria's morning patrol assignment had triggered the largest arms trafficking investigation in recent history. Viktor Kozlov's cooperation revealed corruption within local government and law enforcement that had enabled the criminal operation. Several officials would face federal charges for accepting bribes to provide information about patrol schedules and inspection procedures. The evidence processing would take months to complete, but initial analysis suggested the criminal organization had been operating for over 5 years. The sophisticated security measures and international connections indicated professional criminal enterprise, rather than opportunistic smuggling. Maria received commendation from both Border Patrol and FBI leadership for her professional handling of an extremely dangerous situation. Her quick thinking and careful documentation had been essential to the successful conclusion of the operation. Warehouse complex would require extensive forensic analysis to gather all available evidence about the criminal organization's activities. Ballistics experts, fingerprint specialists, and document analysts would spend weeks examining every aspect of the facility. Agent Chen explained that similar operations were being conducted simultaneously in other countries as international law enforcement agencies coordinated their response to Viktor Kozlov's network. The captured intelligence had provided leads for operations in Europe and Asia. The local community expressed gratitude for the removal of the dangerous criminal operation from their area. Residents had noticed increased truck traffic and suspicious activity around the warehouse, but hadn't known how to report their concerns effectively. Maria's supervisor, Agent Thompson, arrived at the scene to personally thank her for her exceptional service. The Border Patrol would be reviewing training procedures to ensure other agents were prepared to handle similar situations in the future. The FBI offered Maria an opportunity to participate in the ongoing investigation as a liaison officer, recognizing her valuable contribution to the operation's success. The experience had demonstrated her potential for advancement within federal law enforcement. Viktor Kozlov's organization had been responsible for supplying weapons to criminal groups involved in hundreds of violent crimes across multiple states. The dismantling of their operation would significantly impact violent crime rates in affected regions. The investigation revealed that the criminal organization had been planning to expand their operations to include explosives and advanced military equipment. The timing of Maria's discovery had prevented much more dangerous weapons from reaching criminal networks. Agent Rodriguez emphasized that the success of the operation demonstrated the importance of coordination between local and federal law enforcement agencies. Maria's professional response and the FBI's rapid deployment had created an effective partnership. The weapons seized from the warehouse would be destroyed according to federal protocols, ensuring they could never reach criminal organizations. The communications equipment would be analyzed to gather additional intelligence about international arms trafficking networks. Maria's experience during the standoff had provided valuable insights into federal law enforcement operations that would benefit her future career. The FBI had extended an invitation for her to participate in advanced training programs for multi-agency operations. The captured criminals faced federal charges that could result in life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The severity of charges reflected the serious nature of international arms trafficking and its impact on public safety. Kozlov's cooperation had revealed the existence of other criminal leaders who remained at large. Federal agencies would use the intelligence to conduct additional operations against the remaining components of the international network. The warehouse facility would be demolished once the investigation was complete, eliminating the infrastructure that had supported the criminal operation. The site would be converted to legitimate commercial use that would benefit the local community. Agent Chen noted that the operation had demonstrated the effectiveness of federal resources when properly coordinated with alert local law enforcement. Maria's actions had been a perfect example of how patrol officers could contribute to major investigations. The success of the warehouse operation would be studied by law enforcement agencies as an example of effective crisis response. The coordination between multiple agencies and the professional handling of a complex tactical situation provided lessons for future operations. Maria returned to her regular patrol duties with enhanced appreciation for the complexity of law enforcement challenges along the border. Her experience had demonstrated that routine assignments could quickly escalate into situations requiring federal response and international coordination.